Hello, everyone, and welcome to PyData Global 2024. We are so glad that you're here with us today. We have an exciting talk from our speaker, Andrew Weeks. Andrew is over in London and very involved in the PyData London, and we're really thankful that he is here today speaking to you at Global. I would encourage you to use the chat feature to interact and ask questions. There's a Q&A button. Andrew will take some questions towards the end, but I don't want to take up any more time. Andrew, thanks again for being here, and the floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, excited to be doing this. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about taking data science from zero to production. And you've probably all seen headlines like these. Why does it seem so difficult to take data science projects from zero to production? Now, it's fair to point out that an awful lot of ideas in any area won't work out. But it does feel like data science projects perhaps have a particularly poor track record in that. And I think a lot of it has to do, with the intrinsic complexity we see in data. The answer is rarely yes or no. Getting a good answer can be difficult. And of course, the answers can change over time due to drift. And this creates, I guess, some inertia that makes changing direction harder. When we have to make a change, we don't only need to rewrite code, but we also need to, sometimes restructure a significant amount of the data. So wouldn't it be good if we didn't have to change direction quite so much? So I'm going to talk about discovery from the perspective of a data scientist. This is a product management technique I first read about in Marty Kagan's book Inspired, but there have been other great books since from Teresa Torres, Joshua Seiden as well. And discovery tries to answer the question, how do we know we're making something that people want, or perhaps more concisely, what problem are we solving? Because if we can do this, and we're confident that we're working on the right problem, the chance of us having to make one of those awkward direction changes goes down a lot. And hopefully with that, our chance of success goes up a lot too. So we can begin the discovery process looking at a little bit of planning before going into how to use it day to day, as that's where we're going to get our context from. And we're not building this in a vacuum. We're doing this within a business that already will have high-level goals for the quarter or for the year. And we'll use that as our starting point, so we make sure we're all going in the same direction. So here's an example of a business impact. We want to increase profit for our tenant verification product by 25%. And that's a great business priority, but we can't really grapple with that directly. How do we know if we're actually increasing the revenue? But we can break that down into product outcomes, which are team-sized largely. And they are changes in human behavior that drive the business impact. So here I've got an example, fewer customers calling technical support when verifying their employment and income. And that's just one possible outcome. We should come up with many of these, or a number of these. And it might not be all we need to do to increase the profit by 25%, but it does link directly to the impact above. And it is a lot more tightly scoped and something that we can probably influence ourselves directly. These are not outputs. They're not things like add a chatbot to help people when they get stuck. We haven't said anything about how we're going to solve this problem, and that's by design. We get a lot of freedom this way to find good solutions. And the outcomes are it's basically a contract between the team and the rest of the company. This is what we're agreeing to change. So outcomes are really useful. It's a great team-sized objective, as I said, but they do tend to run for months, which can make iterating and learning from them quickly quite difficult. But of course, we can break that down further into opportunities, unmet customer needs that satisfy the outcome, like I want to verify my self-employed income. And that's now something that is pretty small and we can grapple with pretty directly. So that's a good start. And we can break that down a little bit further into solutions. Like I want to, sorry, I lost my place. Like verifying income through sharing bank account transactions. And as with the outcomes, having there should be many opportunities that can lead you to the particular outcome and many solutions that can lead to the opportunity. I just put one example of each up here. Now that's quite a few layers that we've been through here. But because we got to the solution working through all the previous layers, we can be pretty confident that this solution that we came up with about verifying income through sharing bank account transactions, if it works, will solve the opportunity and it will help with the outcome and ultimately help with the company goal. And it's also really nice that we can keep doing this once we move on to our day-to-day work. We can keep tracing that path so we know that what we're doing is supporting the company goals and does matter. So if we've finished going through the planning process and we're looking for some potential ways forward, but which are the most promising ones? Which one should we choose? And we can look at that through discovery and delivery cycles, which is kind of where we sit day to day. So looking first of all at a bit of discovery. We've got our candidate solutions and we want to decide between them. A nice way to test the potential of these solutions is by identifying assumptions that need to be true for them to work. Assumptions can go wrong in four main ways, the four types of risks. And these are a feasibility risk, can we build it, the thing that we're proposing to do, a value risk, if we did build it, would anyone buy or choose to use it, a usability risk, can people figure out how to use it if we built it, and a viability risk, will stakeholders support it? So that might be internal stakeholders like leadership or the marketing team, but it might also be external people like regulators, if that applies to you. Taking a look at some examples of this. We've got the solution again, verifying income through sharing bank account transactions. A feasibility risk assumption. We can accurately identify income from bank transaction data and distinguish this from other payments. Now, if we can't do that with a relatively high degree of accuracy, we won't be able to verify income. A value risk assumption. Consumers are willing to share their bank account transactions to secure a tenancy. Even if we had a great model, if no one was willing to share their data, then this product wouldn't be very useful. And a viability risk assumption. We treat income from disability payments or social security in a non-discriminatory manner. And again, even if we were able to make a pretty accurate model and consumers are willing to share their data, if we were discriminating against people in protected classes, this would not be a legal thing to have. So once we've got our assumptions, and that was just a few examples, we should prioritize them. And basically, this is about finding the highest impact and the highest uncertainty one, and tackling that first. If something is crucial for success of the solution and we have very little evidence that it will work, then we need to look at that one first, de-risk that one up front, so we can increase the chance of success as quickly as possible. So doing discovery as a data scientist, we've got all of these assumptions and risks from a nice logical process, but how do we deal with them? It seems like a lot of risks, and a lot of them are quite a long way outside our comfort zones, perhaps, and what we're getting paid to do. But discovery is a team sport. Ideally, a team would have a data scientist or two, a product manager, and depending on the problem, maybe an engineer or a designer as well. But it's flexible depending on who you need within the who you need for the work that you're doing. So it means that we won't be tackling all of these assumptions ourselves, but being part of the discovery process from the outset is really valuable for us to learn and to influence direction. We often find there's a strong feedback loop between things that we find out during customer interviews and what we discover during analysis or early modeling. So they really build on each other there. And data science projects, at least in new areas, at least in my experience, tend to be dominated by feasibility risks, can we build it risks, and value ones, does anyone want it risks. The feasibility ones tend to be led by data scientists, the value ones by product. So these assumptions are supposed to be pretty quick to test. The books I mentioned a bit earlier talk about getting through maybe 10 to 20 experiments or these assumptions per week. And I've got to be honest, I have not managed to do that. But I have got to a stage where I can get through maybe one or two larger ones, and that feels like good progress. A lot of the work we do as data scientists is about testing assumptions through analysis and initial model building. But there is intrinsic uncertainty within the data, which makes estimating and scoping the delivery of this work quite difficult. We might plan, for example, to import the data, do some EDA, do some transformations, create some features, build a model maybe. And we will do all of that, but that's probably only describing 20% of what we will spend our time on. The vast majority is going to be driven by what we find in the data and iterating within it. And that means that Scrum style complexity estimation and de-risking by planning up front doesn't really work that well, unfortunately, because we just can't predict what we're going to find within the data. I have found a reasonable way of managing this, potential for scope creep there, and to avoid at least most of the rabbit holes, is through some regular check-ins, to check-ins with others on the team, so we can basically keep ourselves on track. And also, as a bonus, people will often come up with great ideas that we haven't thought of yet. In that 80% of the data, 80% of the time that we haven't accounted for up front, the data will probably ask us a lot of interesting questions that we will want to explore. And again, this is where knowing what the outcome is, having a really clear idea of what we're going for, really understanding the problem, can help us a huge amount in that context for making those micro decisions correctly. So once we've done our round of discovery and validated an assumption or two, we can then move on to delivery. In trying to scope the work here to the assumptions that we validated and nothing else. That might mean that there are some things that aren't, fully architectured, some obvious improvements that you're deciding not to make at this point, and that's okay. This is the classic, am I overall under engineering this question? But framing it in terms of what's already been validated and what we know for sure can be a really useful kind of way of thinking about it to understand if we should invest or not at this point. And similarly, writing code that is defensive for risks that we haven't addressed yet. For example, if you don't know whether the model will be used in batch mode only, then building it in a way that will work in batch and online might be a good idea. Although, of course, that's going to be very problem specific. But we should be writing good code during the delivery cycle. We have validated this solution, so we have confidence that it's worth doing well. And Agile is a really great tool here, a really great framework here for doing this, about delivering end-to-end value. That fits really nicely with what we're doing here. And thinking about, we're delivering end-to-end value for the assumptions, for the solutions that we've proved out. And of course, using good engineering practices like design patterns, coding standards, tests, that's also worth investing in. So I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about trust. I've talked about how you stand a better chance of solving real problems with this approach, but it can be a tough sell for stakeholders when they feel like they're giving up control. The concrete certainty of delivering outputs to a schedule actually looks very attractive, even if it doesn't often work out that way. And the best way I found to tackle that is about getting agreement early and often. During the planning phase, get stakeholders together and ask them to trade off priorities in the problem space. Again, we're not talking about solutions here. This is really useful for understanding which problems are vital that we tackle now and which problems can perhaps wait or aren't so important. And the stakeholders don't need to create the outcomes with you, although that can be useful, but do make sure that you get agreement from everyone on the outcomes and any linked OKRs. This is, as I said, the contract that you're making between the team and the rest of the organization. State what you're doing as well. And even more importantly, what you're not doing before you start. And report progress on this towards the outcomes regularly through sprint reviews, through project updates, whatever you do internally. That keeps everyone up to date, gives everyone confidence that you're holding up your side of the bargain. There's also huge value in building a first solution. It's the great opportunity to reinforce what you've already agreed, as people won't always engage if you don't have something tangible. And of course, you're going to give people confidence and keep people invested as well that you're actually making good progress. So the discovery process is about managing uncertainty and making the best bets that we can. Spending a small amount of time up front can save us a lot of time later on if we choose a better path forward. If you do know exactly what you're doing, then don't do this. If, for example, there are security issues with the current version of a database and you need to upgrade it to the next version, then just upgrade the database. But if there is significant uncertainty, which nearly always seems to be the case when building something from scratch, then it really helps a lot. I've been using these techniques for quite a few years now as a data scientist, and I realized in retrospect, briefly moonlighting as a product manager, and I found them very useful for working through high uncertainty problems, high uncertainty situations that you typically find within startups. But it's also very motivating, for me and for others, that have been on this journey with me. It gives us a lot of ownership and autonomy, which is great, which is really nice. If you want to know more, these are some great books. They're not specifically aimed at data scientists, but they do go into the process in a lot more detail about how to do it well and avoid some of the pitfalls that perhaps I've skated over here. Although, of course, I'm also happy to talk more about it now or later. Thank you very much. Okay, right. I'll just take a look at questions. Oh, thank you. How much you spend on the discovery phase in an average? How much time do you spend on the discovery phase on average to get you out of a rabbit hole? I think, I mean, so when we're doing, it can depend, to be honest, on how, again, it depends on how much certainty you have around the piece of work that you're doing. You know, sometimes you will end up spending more time on discovery. Sometimes you'll end up, you know, you have a lot of certainty around what you're doing, so you can spend more time in delivery. I've definitely been in both. I guess ideally, as I was saying, you know, if you can get to a pace where you're getting through maybe one or two kind of pieces of or kind of assumptions in a week, then that is fantastic. Sometimes they will be bigger, and that's fine. I've definitely had some that have run for a number of weeks. I've had some that I managed to get through a number in a single week. And how do I, so I hope that's kind of useful. I know it's a little bit qualitative, but at least to give you something of an answer. And how, or sort of a follow-up question on that, how do you get yourself out of a rabbit hole? I think, to be honest, the main thing that I found really useful for that is having someone to review. So the way that I have done this in practice is having some time after my stand-up, after the stand-up that we have as a team, just spending 30 minutes or so with, typically with a colleague, going through that and reviewing what I've been up to. And often at that point, you know, either we're explaining it or they will just point out to me that, yeah, actually, you've just got stuck in something here. And I know I've done the same for them. So I think that's probably the most effective way I've found to deal with that. Okay, right. Let me show that one. So if the customer wants to specify both a desired outcome and a technique to get there, I can explain that choose one, or choose, how do you explain that they need to choose one of those two as the top priority? I mean, I think part of that is, so this is something I didn't, I guess I sort of skated over a bit, which is about how to do discovery and how to do customer interviews, which is a big skill in itself. And yeah, I definitely recommend, you know, reviewing those books for more on that. But I think it's really about, you know, really what you try to do is you don't try and let people propose solutions. A lot of people think they know what they want, but it's really about, you know, trying to get to the underlying needs, the underlying sort of understanding of what they're doing, and not necessarily going by just what one person said, because, you know, some customers, what one particular customer of yours might want is not necessarily what everyone wants, and hopefully, you know, you're building a product here rather than something that is just for one, just as a kind of consultancy piece of work. So I think it really is about just trying to focus it, get that sort of separation, trying to understand the problems, try to generalize from the problems, and then, you know, solve that problem, solve that need, rather than going for a particular way of doing it. Do I have any structured ways to write down discoveries or learning during the discovery phase? I have used, I mean, Yes, and there are. I mean, there are. So there are useful techniques that, again, I didn't discuss in this session, but the continuous discovery habit talks, for example, about opportunity solution trees, which I found a really great way of breaking down from going from the kind of higher level outcomes down to the assumptions, down to the opportunities and the assumptions that come out of that, and then breaking that down further into different ones and different ways of structuring that and prioritizing those as well. That has been, using techniques like that. That's the only technique that is useful, but it is one that's out there. And I don't know. I mean, other things, just, making good, consistent notes about, customer interviews, that sort of thing. Making good notes about the data analysis that you do as well is another thing that's incredibly valuable. Happy to speak more about that if you'd like. Okay, just I've got time for a couple more. Do I have any preferred tools for building prototypes quickly? I don't, actually. I mean, I know there are lots of good tools for doing that sort of things out there. I guess the space that I've been in has been more working on, so it hasn't been about creating tools that are being put in front of people directly. Other people, so that I've been working with, have done things in Figma and other tools like that, which I know isn't quite the answer that you're looking for there. But no, I don't. I know there are lots of great tools out there. I am very open to learning more about that myself. Okay, right. And final one. Oh, it's like thanks. I had a project where we were trying to dictate how instead and worked it backwards to the desired end state. Yes, yeah, exactly. This is where it was yeah, I think if you can get to a point where, basically this is about trying to intervene, trying to stop things early, trying to figure out, get to an answer, get to, really understand the need. And it is about trying to get that separation to give, as I said, to get that kind of freedom, that's the space for you to be able to work through this in your own in the best way that you believe, rather than having that sort of micromanaged by someone else. Okay, right. I think we are just about out of time, but thank you very much, everyone, for the questions. I hope I managed to answer those reasonably. I'm also very happy to follow up with this later, or to talk more about this. Yeah, but thank you very much for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks.